you could make a decision to do table work. And the decision to do table work as opposed to the other work initially could be because you see that the person is an inveterate doer. You know, it's that you can see that. And you could explain a little bit about the head and neck and see how far you can get with that, and then realize that, okay, I'm going to put them on the table and reduce the amount of doing to wake up different muscle fiber, and then take them through the musician stuff or the dance stuff or the whatever stuff, the computer stuff. So we're going to play with and part of the nature of this work is demonstration. How does this relationship affect everything else? Because they're not thinking that at all. They have no idea about it, nor did I. So what we've done, we did it a couple of days ago. My preference as a teacher is not to start off the way we're going to do it. It's an innocent way of introducing something to them. But my preference is touch. And for when you bring a friend in, you know, and then ask me to introduce the work to them. It's helpful for you, I think, because you'll see me making decisions about how to work with it based on their response to what I say and to the quality of touch. A lot of, when somebody in HEI they've done 3 years of training and they want to become a certified HEI teacher, they go through 3 evaluations with elected sponsors. What I'm mainly interested in, because depending on where they're trained, they're going to do it differently than I would expect somebody to come out of this with. And a lot of times that is not too much direction that they have when they put their hands on it. But I'm interested in the choices that they make. To how do you introduce this to a given person, given the circumstances that you find yourself in the dialogue with that person. And you get better at that the more people you work with. So what we'll explore is the rudimentary aspect of introducing to a new person the role of the head and the cervical and occipital reflexes and how they affect everything. You don't need to do the chair work. You can throw the whole thing out. It's, you can, because it's just a demonstration. And you don't want them to think they're trying to learn how to sit right and stand right, because you're not. The big thing is, how do you bring it into your life? So that we're going to try an experiment. I did it a couple of days ago, and it didn't work with everybody. So what you're really introducing to everyone, including yourself, and when you were going through all of your pain, you said I tried to explore the inhibitive aspect of everything. And what you were doing is exactly what you would do with a student, a person who comes in. How do I bring this work into my life? You give them an experience that they can't have on their own with your hands. And that convinces many of the people that come in that there's something here that works for you. Because you feel the difference when you play your guitar. You hear the difference, etc., etc. But it's elusive. So how do you bring it into your life when you're in excruciating pain and something's going on over which you have no control except your response to it? That's it.
Yeah.
And your response to it affects the quality of the experience. So in a moment, we will go sit to stand. But before that, if you think of standing up right now, if everybody just thinks of standing up, you wouldn't stand up unless there was a motivation for you to get out of the chair in your life. Maybe you got to go to the bathroom. Maybe you want a drink of water. Maybe you're tired of sitting down. It's time to take a walk. I mean, there are all kinds of things that keep you from being in one place too long of a period of time because life takes over. So in that, you are largely goal-oriented. So you develop patterns of behavior unconsciously that help you achieve those goals that may have little or nothing to do with the way you're designed to function. You get into trouble. So the question is, if I came over and I put my hands on you, and I'm going to do it in a moment, and you're going to do it with each other, and I take you in and out of a chair to show you that there's a postural set that precedes and accompanies your movement in order to satisfy your goal of getting from there upright. And what I'm introducing to you is the way that you're actually designed to move from a seated position to an upright position, or an upright position to a seated position, or a squat position, or whatever position you occupy. So if that's what you're teaching somebody, and that's what I'm going to do with you at some point, it must mean that I tap into what facilitates your movement with my hands. So if I don't touch you and you get out of the chair by yourself, you can't put your hands on your head and neck and get out of the chair. So Mr. Alexander said, you can let your neck be free, or you can allow your neck to be free, or whatever you want to do there. The purpose of which is to allow a slight movement of the head, which you may or may not feel, slightly away from the body rather than being pulled into the body. And when you do that, there's more of a unity throughout all of your neuromuscular, so that you'll come more easily out of the chair without having to work that. So let's try. So first of all, you'll probably have to come away from the computer a little bit to do this, Ari. Just slip your chair a little bit out of in front of it, flip it over a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be standing and sitting.
Okay.
Yeah, you just took away the demon. She just moved the demon. Okay. So just have a stand. Stand up.
In a habitual way?
I'm sorry?
In a habitual way? Or
well,
thinking about
yes, it will be habitual. Forget the Alexander work for a moment and just stand up. And then that's a good, that's a lot of people do that. Is that I need help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now have a seat. Very good. All right.